Welcome to our webinar, Engaging the Next Generation in Scenic Conservation. We ask you now to mute yourselves until we open things up for Q&A. If you have a question during the presentation, you can write them in the chat box. My name is Robin Buchanan. I am the founder and executive director of Project GreenSchools, and I'm thrilled to be here today with Scenic America for a second year in a row, helping to bring scenic conservation education to more students and schools. Scenic America is the only national nonprofit that helps citizens protect the scenic qualities of America's roadways, countryside, and communities. Last year, we released a series of free lesson plans and resources through this partnership. And for more information and to see the resources mentioned, you can check out our Scenic Conservation Pathway, which can be easily accessed on Project GreenSchools' website. A bit about Project GreenSchools. For those of you new to our community, Project GreenSchools is a national nonprofit organization whose mission is to develop the next generation of environmental leaders through project-based learning, community service, and recognition. We have directly served more than 6,500 schools in 45 states across the US, and our programs have now been used in 45 countries as well. Our students in schools receive the resources they need to take on projects in order to transform their schools and communities. Project GreenSchools' 13 Pathways for Greening Your School provide a sustainable framework for education and learning. You can find games, lesson plans, videos, apps, national and international events, and more in these pathways. We think it's important to note that the 13 Pathways for Greening Your School have also been aligned with the United Nations SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals. Note, our most colorful pathway, which you can see, is the Scenic Conservation Pathway. Next, Project GreenSchools inspires students to change the world to a cleaner, healthier, more sustainable future. We work hard to provide extraordinary energy and environmental education opportunities for students and schools. Our students have participated in White House climate summits, meetings with state and federal agencies, the United Nations, exciting sporting events, and more. We hope following today's webinar, you will consider speaking with local officials, administrators, and people in leadership about protecting places that are important to you in your community, and we ask that you think about how you can inspire change and impact. Before we shift gears to scenic conservation, I'd like to share a few key programs and opportunities that Project GreenSchools offers. We have an awesome National Youth Council that is more than 100 members strong. Students in grades 5 through 12 have a seat at our table where they connect with like-minded students, government, corporate, and professional leaders. Council members are often invited to represent the student voice at special events as they are key leaders of our organization and in their schools. National Green School Society is a society that brings honor to the environmental student. Students work independently or in groups and implement meaningful service projects. Students earn bronze, silver, or gold level pins based on hours served and their achievement. Graduating seniors also become eligible to apply for an honor stole, and there is more information about this program on our website. Lastly, for now, our Green Difference Award application period is still open through the end of March. If you know a leader or group of leaders who have made the green difference, consider nominating them for this prestigious award. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our partner, Mark Falzone, President of Scenic America, who will talk to us about current issues related to scenic conservation and how to make a difference in your community. Mark.
Thank you very much, Robin. It's really a pleasure to be joining you today on this webinar. And I just want to give a little background to this work. First, just a little bit of background about Scenic America. We're the only national 501c3 nonprofit organization that's dedicated solely to preserving and enhancing the visual character of our countryside. And you can draw a straight line from Lady Bird Johnson's work when she was First Lady in the 1960s, and she formed the White House Conference on Natural Beauty, to our foundation, which was in 1978 as the Coalition to Preserve Scenic Beauty. And then our name was changed in 1989 to Scenic America. So as you can see, we've been around 42 years, and we have 51 state and local affiliates hundreds of volunteers, thousands of supporters. But I also just wanted to say that we're really happy to be here with Robin and with Project GreenSchools, because one of the things that we care about is indeed the visual character of our country, is of course our mission, but scenic conservation education we think is really important. And I want to give a shout out also to the history, our history in that, which the Dunn Foundation was very instrumental, headed up by David Dunn, and they were very instrumental in getting a lot of the early research on this, well over 10, 15 years ago. They were really trendsetters in this area. So I want to thank them. And a lot of the work that you see that Project GreenSchools and Scenic America has done in this, we owe a great debt of gratitude to the Dunn Foundation for that. And for that, again, we do thank them. So with that said, we're going to move on to the next slide. So I want to talk just a little bit about our work. I also want to give a shout out to Rich Youngkin, by the way, who is one of the pioneers of this as well through the Dunn Foundation. But now I'm just going to shift gears and talk just a little bit about what Scenic America does overall. So as I mentioned, we're a national nonprofit advocacy organization, and we have different scenic beauty goals of federal policy. One of them is to reopen the National Scenic Byways Program. This is a program that's been around for several decades, but for the last decade has been closed. There hasn't been any new nominations to the program in the last 10 years, and we thought it was high time that Congress reopened the program. And so if we go to the next slide, you'll see that we in fact did get it reopened. We're really thrilled about that. We're very proud, and Congress passed a piece of legislation that we authored last year called the Reviving America's Scenic Byways Act of 2019. It was signed by the president in September, and we're very proud of this because it's in our 42-year history, this is the first time that Scenic America has authored and passed a piece of legislation in Congress and signed by the president. You'll see how we did that in the next slide. We did that by having a bipartisan, bicameral approach. And that's really what we're all about. Congressman David Cicilline is our lead. He is a Democrat of Rhode Island. You could see Garrett Graves was his co-lead, a Republican of Louisiana in the House. And in the Senate, our champion was Senator Susan Collins, a Republican of Maine, and her co-lead was Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland. These four members of Congress performed amazing feats in order to get this done. As you know, Congress right now is mired in division and gridlock in general. And so we're really thrilled to get a pro-environment, pro-scenic beauty piece of legislation passed through Congress and onto the president's desk and signed by the president. And representing the viewpoint from Congress, we do want to run just a little quick video from Congressman Cicilline, who is the chair of the America the Beautiful caucus.
Hello, I would like to welcome you to Scenic America. As chairman of the America the Beautiful caucus, I've enjoyed a strong relationship with Scenic America. Together, we've worked hard on issues related to beautifying our roadways, preserving parks and open spaces, protecting community character, and promoting economic development by advocating for the health of the visual environment all across the United States. As you know, earlier this year, we were able to enact into law the bipartisan Reviving America's Scenic Byways Act, which will allow states to once again apply for scenic byway designations. This program showcases our nation's natural grandeur, history, and culture, while also being an economic driver of tourism by promoting international visitation and creating good-paying jobs. And we know scenic beauty is good for business. One report from the University of Minnesota in 2010 found that travelers on the Paul Bunyan Scenic Byway and the Lake Country Scenic Byway provided $21.6 million in economic activity for the area. Another study in Utah in 2013 found almost $13 million in annual economic activity from Scenic Byway 12. And now that the program is restarted, I'm proud that at least 44 state scenic byways in 17 states will be able to apply for a National Scenic Byway designation. I care about scenic beauty because ingrained in all Americans is the desire to explore our unique landscapes and to celebrate the diverse beauty of our country. In order to continue to inspire future generations to make these trips and expeditions, it's imperative that we continue to work to improve the visual character of our country's natural and built environments. And I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you for that. And so with that said, the bill that we just were talking about and that Congressman Cicilline was just talking about, that passed the House in February of 2019, 404 to 19, an overwhelmingly bipartisan margin. It also passed the Senate unanimously in September of 2019, and then later that month was signed by the President into law and became public law number 116-57. And for those of you at home, that means that this was only the 57th bill to become law in the 116th Congress. So, we're very proud to survive the process of getting through Congress and signed by the President. So we'll move on from here. So I want to talk to you about some of the other issues that Scenic America is working on now that we've talked about scenic byways. One of them is ending the practice of tree cutting for billboard visibility. And as we move to the next slide, you'll see that this is one where a picture tells 1,000 words. These trees are being cut just for the sake of billboard visibility. That's the only reason they're being cut. And they're owned by you, the taxpayer. And we think that it's tragic, and we don't think that publicly owned trees on publicly owned land should be cut just for the sake of billboard visibility. Now, this picture really illustrates it, where the houses and the neighborhood that you see on the right-hand side, which is the unfortunate after picture, they're actually in the shot on the left, but you just can't see them because the trees are acting as a natural sound barrier, a natural visual barrier, a natural pollution barrier, a natural runoff barrier. This is this side of the road that this is being taken from. That's actually an interstate highway. And now this neighborhood is exposed to the interstate highway because this billboard company wanted a little more visibility for their sign, which, by the way, you can see perfectly fine in even in the before picture. So it's obviously a shame, and we are working on that. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see where this is happening. The trees, we want to protect the trees, and the states in green are protecting the trees by state law. Unfortunately, the states in red are not protecting their trees by state law or regulation. And what we want to do is make sure we turn the whole country green. And so if we go to the next slide, we're going to show you how we're trying to turn the whole country green. And that's by making this a national law. So that way we are protecting publicly owned trees, public trees on public lands. And we're doing that through a bill called the Transportation Reauthorization. And this bill that we're trying to get this language attached to, this is the bill that must pass every 5 or 6 or 7 years that funds our highways. And so it is a bill that will eventually pass, and we hope to get this language attached to it. So that's exactly how we're trying to get this done. I want to tell you about some more issues, and we'll move on to the next slide as we do that. Another issue that we work on are gateway communities. So gateway communities are defined as the communities that host or are adjacent to national parks, state parks, federal lands. It could be a U.S. forest, it could be Bureau of Land Management land, it could be Fish and Wildlife land. And so we care a lot about these communities. We want to make sure that in order to harness the economic development potential of the area and also to look beautiful, we want to make sure that they take on the character of the land that they host. That way, you as a tourist or a user or a resident feel as though you're already in the park when you enter their town. So as we move to the next slide, you're going to see how it is, what it is we're trying to do. And again, the same bill is what we're trying to get this language in. And actually, we already have, this is another victory. We already have this language into this bill. So the committee in the Senate, called the Senate EPW Committee, or the Environment and Public Works Committee, already put language in there that helps these gateway communities by allowing this pot of money called the Federal Lands Access Program to pay for things such as interpretive panels, contextual wayfinding markers, landscaping is a big one, obviously, and mitigation of visual blight. And so that is really one of our big goals. And again, that's another victory in progress that's currently in this bill that is currently in the Senate. And we're looking to get this make sure this language stays in this bill all through the process. So, and as we move to the next slide, another priority I wanted to talk to you about is undergrounding. So a lot of people don't think of overhead wires because we've lived with them our whole lives, and they sort of become part of the landscape. But when you actually stop and look at them, they're really a visual blight on the landscape, and they're also unsafe. If you think of the fire that started in California, that was caused by overhead power wires, power lines, and we want to make sure that that doesn't happen anymore. And so if you look at the slides here, this is a good before and after of what things can look like when you underground overhead wires. It really does open up a retail area. It opens up your main street. If it's over a visual vista, it opens up the vista so that way you have beautiful views and they're not marred by these wires. And so that's something that we also think is really important. And so what we're trying to do is to amend existing federal programs to allow the undergrounding overhead wires as an allowable cost. So that way some of the cost of this will be paid for as well. And then finally, as we move to our next slide, I want to talk about another issue, which is we want to support the integrity of national monuments. So here, we want to protect our parks. We want to protect our, not only our federal parks, which we do through the National Park Service, and making sure that they get all the deferred maintenance paid for that they need, but also we want to fully fund the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is for state parks and local parks. And also we want to support the integrity of these national monuments. So we want to make sure that we don't trim back our national monuments. We want to expand them, if anything, so that way these national monuments are protected for generations to come. And so that's something that, again, we care about very deeply and we're very involved with nationally. As we go to our last slide here, at least for my part of the presentation, together with Project GreenSchools, we're educating students and schools on the importance of protecting the visual environment. And what Robin's going to go through in a moment is the work that Project GreenSchools is doing to fulfill our collective vision and the vision of people like Rich Youngkin and David Dunn and the Dunn Foundation of educating youth on scenic conservation education. And obviously, everybody watching this webinar is part of that solution because we want to make sure that our youth learns about this and that our teachers have the resources to do the teaching on this. So with that said, I want to turn it back over to a great partner. Robin Buchanan has doing tremendous work with Project GreenSchools, and we couldn't be prouder to work with you.
Thanks again, Mark. So as I mentioned before, this year we launched a new set of lessons that we're excited to bring to you today. We believe these resources will offer meaningful ways to engage students in scenic conservation education. These lessons can be scaled and modified for at-home use, especially amidst this nationwide effort to promote distance learning during the challenging times in the face of a global public health crisis. At the conclusion of the webinar, we'll tell you about additional training events and opportunities to share best practices, and we hope you'll join us in DC. Let's take a look at the online resources. Here on PGS website, you can easily find a link to the Scenic Conservation Pathway over to the right, or when clicking through the 13 pathways. You can see the existing pathway and its content. In order to access the new materials, we ask you to complete a quick form, and then you'll receive an email notification providing links to the 3 new lesson plans, the video you saw today, and other related resources. We're now going to show you what those lessons look like that you'll be receiving. We recommend the lessons for grades 7 through 12 in ELA, social studies, civics, and science. Our first lesson, preview your town's natural resources and beauty and nominate your town's scenic byway. In this lesson, students will complete a nomination submission to have a specific area of their town designated as a scenic byway by the Federal Highway Administration, modeled after the federal application. Students will also demonstrate their understanding of why scenic byways can be beneficial for town, both visually and economically. And students will use a variety of ELA skills to persuade their classmates to choose their scenic byway. Lesson 2. Lesson 2, Cleaner, Greener, Underground Smart Grid Technologies. Smart grid technologies are making their way into many cities and towns in order to improve communication between consumers and producers about their energy use and costs and so much more. In this lesson, students will understand the environmental, aesthetic, and health benefits associated with undergrounding utility lines, as well as create a public service announcement to residences on switching to cleaner, greener, underground smart grid technology. And the last lesson, lesson number 3, is about designing smart cities and town planning. As cities and towns look to master planning for innovative and efficient ways to bring their cities and towns into the 21st century, smart cities and context-sensitive solutions offer guidance and a path forward. In this lesson, students will learn key features of a smart city, as well as develop a transportation facility that fits in physical settings and preserves scenic, aesthetic, historic, and environmental resources. Students will be asked to present their findings at a local mock town council addressing energy efficiency, social equality, aesthetic values, and environmental qualities. On behalf of Project GreenSchools and Scenic America, I'd like to thank students, classrooms, and schools looking to take on improving America's roadways, countryside, and communities for a greener future. I'd also like to take this time to tell you about an opportunity to continue the conversation. Due to the coronavirus, we needed to postpone our previously scheduled Boston training following Project GreenSchools Green Difference Awards ceremony. We plan on hosting an in-person training this fall in Washington, D.C. This 2-day conference will be scheduled to take place in either September or October of 2020. Dates and details will be coming soon. This conference will be a unique opportunity to hear from advocates, share best practices on scenic education, discuss the work you have or plan to implement, tour federal buildings and American University, and meet with local legislators inside the Capitol. Please share our scenic conservation pathway and complete a brief form to download the 3 new lesson plans, videos, and materials mentioned in today's webinar. Materials can be found at projectgreenschools.org/scenic conservation. Again, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today, and thank you to Mark Falzone and Scenic America for the important work you do.